No.
Good morning. Okay, so yesterday I kind of got ahead of myself because I wasn't sure if there was going to be a siyum last night, so I wanted to get close to the end. But since you weren't there, Stan, we'll back up to 76A. Let's see. Let's go back to um, let's go back to 75B. Um, hmm, wherever I go back to, it's kind of in the middle. Um, all right, let's go back to 75B. Um, the about 8 lines up. There's two dots. Um, Tana Rabbana. Um, Tana Rabbana. Halokech. So we're talking about how to kosher something, how to make something kosher if it's absorbed. First, we started talking about yayin nesach, wine, unkosher wine, but we're going to broaden our discussion to other types of things, other to non-kosher food as well. If you buy food utensils from a non-Jew, if it hadn't been used before, it's brand new matbilan, then you just put them in the mikvah, and they're good to go. If the Ovid Kachavim had used them for cold food only, kugon, kosos, vikitonos, utzlochios, like cups, scoops, ladles, flasks. So madichon umatbilin v'hem tarim. You wash them out, you rinse them, and then you put them in the mikvah, and then you can use them. And here tahorim doesn't mean like a ritual status of tuman tara. It means it can be used for kosher purposes. If it was used for hot food, like pots and kettles and urns, magilan, umatbilan, vehintarim. You do hagala, which is immerse them in boiling water and hot water, and then you take them to the mikvah, and they're good to go. Or if they're used directly on the fire, kagon hashpudin v'haskolos, like spits or grills. You put the food directly on the hot grill, and then you have to do libun, which is you have to put them on the fire, basically heat them up on the fire, and then put them in the mikveh, and they're good. And in all of these cases, if they had been used by the non-Jew for non-kosher purposes, ad shelo yatil v'shelo yagil v'shelo yilabin. Before you do any of these, if you haven't done any of these steps yet, there's a machlokas whether you can eat the food that was prepared with it if you hadn't completed these steps. And lo kasha, but they're not really arguing. So there's a machlokas about the whole principle here is that the non-kosher the pot absorbs something of the non-kosher food that's used in it, and then when you use it for your kosher food, it emits that whatever it absorbed, and it goes into your kosher food, rendering it non-kosher. But the question is that everyone agrees that is if it's a positive flavor, a flavor that you find beneficial. But if it's negative, right, if it's something that you don't want, that you find detrimental, so then there's a machlokas whether we consider that flavor to have been imparted to to the kosher food, to the food that you're cooking. So in other words, we're saying that the brisa that says it's okay to use it, that's because it's nosin tam lifgam. It's a negative flavor, and so there's no problem with what it absorbed. And the brisa that says you can't use it, there is a problem. Um, but they all agree that if it's a positive flavor, then um, if it were to be considered a beneficial flavor, then the food would be rendered non-kosher if you hadn't carried out the koshering steps. If you say that it's okay if it's a detrimental flavor, so you're saying that, listen, why is it considered non-beneficial flavor? Because it's not kosher. You don't want non-kosher. So then there's no situation where there's non-kosher flavor can be absorbed by your kosher food, because by definition, it's not beneficial. So like, what is the Torah even talking about when it says you can't eat food that has absorbed this non-kosher flavor? It's a detrimental flavor. Because the Torah only says that if it's the same day, right? If it's flavor that has been imparted to the pot, been absorbed by the pot in the same day that you're using the pot, then it's beneficial. But after that, later on, then it becomes a negative, a detrimental flavor. It's gone stale basically. So then become velech. Okay, so then tell us that, like, after day one, after the day that it was used for non-kosher food, any time in the future, then it should be fine, right? So tell us that. So my answer is no. Really, you're right. If it's been a week since the pot was used for non-kosher food, it should be fine. But we don't want people to get confused. We don't want people to say, "Oh, well, you bought this pot from the soup kitchen, the non-kosher soup kitchen, and you're using it, so I can do that too, but I won't understand that it has to be after the first day." So we just do a blanket prohibition. V'idach. So what about the other view that that you cannot use this detrimental flavor? He would hold that even on the same day, there's a detrimental flavor that gets into the food that you're cooking. So, making a distinction between the first day and the following days doesn't make any difference. Ramin la Rav Amram el Rav Sheshes. Rav Amram asked Rav Sheshes. It's not. Hashpudin v'ha'askala malabnan ba'or. You have spits and grills. You basically you heat them up in the fire to kasher them. Vatnan gabi kadshim. But what about, we have a Mishnah about kadshim, right? The problem with kadshim is, as you know, there's a time limit, right? You bring a sacrifice, and every sacrifice has a time limit on how long you can eat it, and after that, it becomes nosar, leftover, and is forbidden to be eaten. So, what about flavor that's absorbed in a pot that cooked kudshim, and then 2 days later the sacrifice expired? So, what about the flavor that was imparted into that pot? Doesn't that become nosar as well, and should be forbidden? And we have this Mishnah, Gabi Kachim, Hashpud v'Askala Magilan B'chamin. That you can take the spit and the grill that was used for kachim, and you don't need libun. You just need hagala. You just need to boil it in water, not directly on the fire. Amarle said to him, Amar my son. Mine and kashim is they're two separate topics. Kachim and non-kosher food is two separate things. Hacha heterabala. When the kachim was absorbed into the pot, there was nothing wrong with it, right? It was on the day of the sacrifice. It's perfectly good for eating. It's absorbed by the pot. No, there's no problem there. But hasam isurabala. But that's a different situation from when the food was absorbed into the pot. When it's non-kosher food, it was non-kosher to begin with. So Amarava says, I understand your question. Kipalit, Isur Kapalit. Like, what do we care what it was when it got absorbed? Now it's being retransferred back to the food you're cooking, right? And now it's no sir already. So, like, why is there a distinction? Well, what's the distinction between kachim and non-kosher food? Elamarava, Rava has a different answer. Mamai Hagala Name, Shtifa Marika. what do we when the Mishnah says Hagala, it doesn't really mean the classic Hagala. Just the it's something else. It's Shifo Marika. It's a separate requirement for kachim that has nothing to do with kashrus and food. That's rinsing and scrubbing. Amalei Abayim means Ame. What? That I Hagala is, you can say that Hagala means something different. Riko Shtifam Bitzanan. Hagala B'chamin. Like, don't use the term Hagala. Hagala specifically means hot water, right? Use heat, boiling water. Um, and Mariko Shifa specifically means not hot water, right? You just use cold water to rinse and scrub. So don't tell me that is Hagala. Elam Rabbi has a different answers. Yagid el Reo. One informs the other. Each one informs the other. Tana Hachel Libun. About the non-kosher food, we use the word libun, or the Mishnah teaches you about libun, about this koshering by applying the heat directly to the item. Um, but it also needs Hagala. Tanahasam Hagala Vuadin Libun. Um, and the other Mishnah, the Mishnah about Kashim, mentions Hagala. It says you need to do Hagala, but really you also need Libun. So each one is kind of giving you one detail. I'm like Rava. So Rava says, well, what kind of answer is that? Yache, if that's so, ninhu lukulu b'chada. Like, don't tell me A applies to case one and B applies to case two. Tell me A and B apply to case one, and then in case two, you can use shorthand and say A, and I'll understand, oh, also B, because I know that A and B go together. Um, then you can say one informs the other. But if you say, if case one needs A and case two needs B, then there's it doesn't make sense to say that each one is only telling you half the story, but really you need the other half. How do we distinguish between kachim and non-kosher food? Kachim, the reason is Rav Nachman and Rav Baravua. Diamar kol yom v'yom nasa gil l'chavero. With kachim, um, we're talking about we're operating on the following principle that when you use um, like the use of the utensil every day is both an absorbing and a retransmitting. So if you're using the thing every day, when you absorb something yesterday into the pot, it gets spit back out today. So in other words, there's no nosar here because the pot kind of cleans itself. It emits whatever it absorbed yesterday, and it's not nosar yet, so it's fine. And then what it's absorbing is today's sacrifice, and the process repeats tomorrow. So you never have this kind of lengthy period in which the absorbed flavor becomes nosar because it gets spit out every day. So Gemara says, all right, well, tinach shlamim, that makes sense. The kevan l'shnei yamim misachle, shlamim has an expiry date of 2 days and a night. So mekami didn't have nosar havigil. So if you use the pot every day, so use it for shlamim number one today, and then tomorrow you use it for shlamim number two. So it emits the first shlamim, it's still the valid period. It hasn't become nosar yet. It absorbs the second shlamim, that it'll spit out tomorrow. So then you're fine. But what about chatas? Al chatas. Chatas only has a 1 day period that you can eat it, only today and tonight, right? Kevan d'liyom v'layla misachla, since it's only eaten for 1 day and 1 night, chatas havi nosar. So tomorrow, when I use it, it's already nosar, right? When I use this pot, whatever is absorbed in it, even if I'm using it every day, the next day it's already become nosar, and so it doesn't help you to say it doesn't stay in the pot, it gets emitted by the pot, but it's already nosar when it gets emitted by the pot if it's a chatas on the next day. So tomorrow when I use it for anything, either a chatas or a shlamim, kapali nosar the chatas. Today's chatas that got absorbed is already nosar. Bechatos ubishlamim delachar, and that'll get absorbed by tomorrow's sacrifice. Mar says, I'm right. They answered, Lotzricha. No, not a problem. Dechima vashal bachatas ha'idna, hadar vashal b'ha'idna shlamim. We're talking about when today I use it for a chatas and I use it for a shlamim, right? So the chatas uh, flavor is emitted, is expelled from the pot on the same day, and it's not yet nosar. And then you cook a shlamim, and that's fine for it to be expelled tomorrow because it's a shlamim, so it's got a 2 day period. Um, the chatas l'machor shlam v'yasmal. Bahali kashalim zimnayu, so that they'll get everything is emitted within its expiry period, within its validity period, I should say. If that's the case, what do you even need Hagala for? There's nothing wrong with it. Kasha. Good question. We don't have an answer for that. Rav Papa Amar, high curried, high low curried. There's a difference between non-kosher food being absorbed in the pot and kachim being absorbed in the pot. And this is all kind of in the theoretical realm, I guess. But the non-kosher food is kind of takes root in the pot. And so whereas kachim, perhaps because it's being used every day, it doesn't have a chance to kind of really take root in the pot. And that's the difference between the absorption of non-kosher food and absorption of kachim, and that's why there's a difference. Rashi Amar Li'olam K'Di'amar Meikar. No, we're going to go back to the original. Hacha Terabala, Hacha Yisurabala. We're going to go back to the first thing that Rava said, which we initially rejected out of hand. Rava said that what makes a difference because in Kachim, when it was absorbed by the pot, it was kosher, right? It was okay. Like, that's there was no nosar yet. Nosar kicks in later. With non-kosher food, as soon as at the time it's absorbed by the pot, it's already non-kosher. So but you ask but you ask, well, what does it matter? Because when you're cooking your food in it, it's already become nosar. So like, what do you care how it got absorbed? Because when now we're just talking about the flavor being emitted by the pot and absorbed by your food, but there's nothing tangible there, right? There isn't a piece of meat there. Like, so, so, uh, so since there's no actual ether there, then that's why there was never a tangible piece of isur with the kachim, whereas with the non-kosher food, there was actual non-kosher food involved. Lebanon, and like how hot do you does Lebanon have to be? Rahmani ashatashir klipasa until like you burn off the outer layer of the kli. Okay. The case of Magilan. Now we're going to talk about Hagala. Amar Rav Huna, Yora Katana B'toch Yora Gadol. You take a small pot and put it in a large pot, so it's completely submerged in the hot water. In other words, you put it in a large pot of hot water. Yora Gadol Amai. So what about your biggest pot? How are you going to do that one? You don't have a bigger pot to dunk your big pot in. Tashma, here's the answer. Dahahu Duda Dahavai Be'Rav Akavia. Akavia had this problem. He had a big pot. So what did he do? Gadafna Delisha Apuma. He put a rim of dough around the edge of the top of the pot, so that allowed it to be completely filled right up to the top. Umayu Amaya Varteche. And then he filled it with water, boiled it, and then he was good. So how does that help? That this kind of extra this dough that you put around the rim of the pot allows the water to kind of overflow onto the rim, and therefore it becomes like part of the Hagala. Amar Rav, and Rav said, "Man chakim l'mevad ki hamilsa." Who's what a smart guy. Ilav Rav Akavia, the Gavar Rabba, who if Rav Akavia wasn't so smart, kasavar kavelo kach palto, he would. And this is what he thought that was so smart. Kabolo kach palto, right? The whole principle here is. Um, how do you get rid of the absorbed flavor? The same way, with the same manner of heating that it absorbed it in the first place. Mabol benitzotzos. So the rim of this pot, right? It was never submerged in water, right? That's the whole point. You can't submerge it in water if you don't have a bigger pot. It was only the only absorption that it did was through the splashing of the hot water at the top of the pot over like onto the rim. Um, so afpolto mabol benitzotza. So just as that splashing is how it absorbed anything non-kosher, afpolto benitzotza. So this method allows the same thing to happen, and so it gets it. So it you can purge the rim of the pot in the same way that it was absorbed into the pot. Okay, hasakin shafa vitora. So the last thing in the Mishnah was, um, one second. Hazakin shafa v'hitara. The knife, you scrape it. You just have to scrape off like sharpen it, I guess, like scrape off the surface. Amar vukva barchama v'noatza asar pamim bakarka. Um, you can also stick it in the ground 10 times to kind of rub off the whatever was absorbed by the knife. It has to be like untilled ground because when you plow ground, the earth it gets loosened, and so it's not quite as strong a rubbing off of the knife. This only works for a good quality knife, a good knife in good condition that's not pitted, right? It's smooth, and therefore sticking it in the ground 10 times will actually have an effect of rubbing off whatever needs to be rubbed off. Tanya Namihachi, we have a similar brisa. Sakin Yafa Shem Bagumos, a knife that has no pits in it, it hasn't been pitted. No, it's not sarapam karka. You can just stick it in the ground 10 times to kasher it. Amar Vinabrader of Yeshua, Lecho Batsana. That only works if you want to use it for cold food. Kihadamar Yehuda Bati Bartove, as in this incident with Mar Yehuda and this guy Bati Bartovi. They were having an audience with King Shavar, who had a reputation for, although he was non-Jewish, he knew his halacha pretty well. Aitu l'kamayu esroga. So they brought an esrog to eat. Pasak achal. So the king slices off a piece and ate it. Pasak v'havli Bati Bartovi. He took another slice and he gave it to Bati to eat. Hadar datsa asar yizimni v'bara. And then he kashered his knife by sticking it in the ground 10 times. Pasak havli l'mar Yehuda. And then he cut a piece for Mar Yehuda. So in other words, he treated them differently. Amalei Bati Bartovi, so Bati said to him, Vahu Gavra Love Bar Yisrael. Who? What? I'm Jewish too. How come you're only koshering the knife for this other for Mar Yehuda, not for me? Amalei Markim Limugave. He said, listen, I know that Mar Yehuda is from. But you, Umar Lokim Limugave, I don't know you. I don't know if that's the case. So I didn't think you cared, right? But I know Mar Yehuda cares, so that's why I koshered the knife first. Ikadiyamre, or some say, when he said to him, Amarle, eat karmai avdas bu'urta, I know what you did last night. So Rashi explains that the practice among the Persians was if they had guests, they would send they'd offer them women for the night. And so since this King Shavor was the boss, he knew what happened with the girls. So Mar Yehuda sent the girls away, sent the women away, and Bati welcomed them into his room for the night. So he's like, "Don't tell me how from you are. I know you slept with or maybe not slept with them, but you accepted my offer of entertainment by women last night. So I don't think that you're so frum. So that's why I didn't kasher the knife. But Mar Yehuda, I know is proved himself to be a frum person, so I'm going to kasher the knife for him before I give him food. Hadron Lechasochos HaPoel, V'Slikala Masechos Avodah Zarah, Mazel Tov on completing Masechos Avodah Zarah, and tomorrow David will start with Horios. So look forward to starting and completing that as well. Have a good day, everybody.
Have a good day, Mazel Tov.